recommended that you self-quarantine. Identify a room to be used to self-quarantine and limit contact with healthy persons. Keep away from older persons and persons who have medical conditions that affects their immune system. Monitor for any cold or flu-like symptom for up to 21 days and wash hands frequently with soap and water. If you become seriously ill, call your healthcare provider or 0800-664-2273 for guidance. A health and wellness message from your Ministry of Health. If you have been directly exposed to the new coronavirus or have a history of travel in infected populated areas, it is recommended that you self-quarantine. Identify a room to be used to self-quarantine and limit contact with healthy persons. Keep away from older persons and persons who have medical conditions that affects their immune system. Monitor for any cold or flu-like symptom for up to 21 days and wash hands frequently with soap and water. If you become seriously ill, call your healthcare provider or 0800-664-2273 for guidance. A health and wellness message from your Ministry of Health. If you have been directly exposed to the new coronavirus or have a history of travel in infected populated areas, it is recommended that you self-quarantine. Identify a room to be used to self-quarantine and limit contact with healthy persons. Keep away from older persons and persons who have medical conditions that affects their immune system. Monitor for any cold or flu-like symptom for up to 21 days and wash hands frequently with soap and water. If you become seriously ill, call your healthcare provider or 0800-664-2273 for guidance. A health and wellness message from your Ministry of Health. If you have been directly exposed to the new coronavirus or have a history of travel in infected populated areas, it is recommended that you self-quarantine. Identify a room to be used to self-quarantine and limit contact with healthy persons. Keep away from older persons and persons who have medical conditions that affects their immune system. Monitor for any cold or flu-like symptom for up to 21 days and wash hands frequently with soap and water. If you become seriously ill, call your healthcare provider or 0800-664-2273 for guidance. A health and wellness message from your Ministry of Health. If you have been directly exposed to the new coronavirus or have a history of travel in infected populated areas, it is recommended that you self-quarantine. Identify a room to be used to self-quarantine and limit contact with healthy persons. Keep away from older persons and persons who have medical conditions that affects their immune system. Monitor for any cold or flu-like symptom for up to 21 days and wash hands frequently with soap and water. If you become seriously ill, call your healthcare provider or 0800-664-2273 for guidance. A health and wellness message from your Ministry of Health. If you have been directly exposed to the new coronavirus or have a history of travel in infected populated areas, it is recommended that you self-quarantine. Identify a room to be used to self-quarantine and limit contact with healthy persons. Keep away from older persons and persons who have medical conditions that affects their immune system. Monitor for any cold or flu-like symptom for up to 21 days and wash hands frequently with soap and water. If you become seriously ill, call your healthcare provider or 0800-664-2273 for guidance. A health and wellness message from your Ministry of Health. If you have been directly exposed to the new coronavirus or have a history of travel in infected populated areas, it is recommended that you self-quarantine. Identify a room to be used to self-quarantine and limit contact with healthy persons. Keep away from older persons and persons who have medical conditions that affects their immune system. Monitor for any cold or flu-like symptom for up to 21 days and wash hands frequently with soap and water. If you become seriously ill, call your healthcare provider or 0800-664-2273 for guidance. A health and wellness message from your Ministry of Health. If you have been directly exposed to the new coronavirus or have a history of travel in infected populated areas, it is recommended that you self-quarantine. Identify a room to be used to self-quarantine and limit contact with healthy persons. Keep away from older persons and persons who have medical conditions that affects their immune system. Monitor for any cold or flu-like symptom for up to 21 days and wash hands frequently with soap and water.
Good afternoon and welcome to another installment of Ask the Experts, the live webcast where you get to pose your questions to the experts and have them answered live on air. Today we have with us Chief Education Officer Dr. Carol Babb and Deputy Chief Education Officer Mrs. Cecilia Smith. Due to social distancing protocols, unfortunately for you all, you won't get to see my face today. However, you can focus your attention on these two beautiful young women that we have on the set with us. So, Dr. Babb, Mrs. Smith, how are you all today?
Very good, thank you. Thank you for having us.
So, thank you for being here. We get a lot of questions about education whenever we have Ask the Experts, and I always promise the viewers that we'll have, and I know you guys are always available to us, so we have you here today. So tell us what's the latest with the Ministry of Education as it relates to school reopenings.
Okay, Dorian, thank you again. We all know that school is more than just a place you get educated. It's a place where children are supported. It's a place where they meet their friends. There's a lot of mental, psychological, social support that happens at school. This year, however, school will reopen for primary schools and preschools on the 7th of September for distance education only. And I want to appeal to parents because we will need the support of parents now more than ever, because parents are going to be our co-teachers. We need parents to work with us to make sure that our children are engaged and learning is continued. How can we help our parents to help their students? Parents, just like any other teacher at this time, will need to set up their own little classroom at home, Mrs. Smith, right?
There's learning spaces for the students.
A learning space for their students. We would want parents to designate an area, a learning space, and we want them to prepare it, have a desk, or if not a desk, any place that the child can work in quiet without very little distraction. And as you prepare the room or the space, please do it with the involvement of your child or your children so that they feel involved and they can own it and then they can participate. What about routines, Mrs. Smith? Don't you think our children need routines now more than ever since they are going to be at home?
Certainly, when children are in school, they are generally accustomed to a particular schedule for their class. So they get in at a certain point in the classroom, and then they do a certain activity, and then they go into the first subject, and then the next subject, and so on. So there's a schedule, and children generally understand what it is they will do on Mondays, on Tuesdays, and so on. So in this instance where they are going to be learning at home, the same sort of thing has to happen. It doesn't have to replicate the exact schedule that is at school, but the matter of a schedule, a routine that they understand. When I get up, this is what I do first, then I do second, and so on. It helps them to get into a routine that would be good for them in terms of their expectations for what it is they need to learn each day. So yes, definitely.
Okay, so for example, we would also advise parents to develop a timetable or a plan of action along with your student. Anything you do, do it with their involvement so that they feel included and they will own it and participate more. So for example, you may have a schedule where you allow your child to wake up at 8 a.m., They get up, they shower, they take a bath, and they brush their teeth, they have breakfast, and then maybe classes begin at 9 a.m. And depending on the age of your child, if your child is 5 or younger, a little bit older, their classes should not exceed about 20 to 25 minutes. If they are a little bit older, they can go a bit longer. But whatever you do or whatever structure you create, involve your child and ensure that they get breaks. Please don't have them sitting down all morning or all afternoon. They must get breaks. Encourage them to walk, to do some exercises, share what the expectations are so that they know fully in advance.
Right. So if we could get into a little bit about now what should actually be happening in terms of the school's role in all of this. We have indicated that for preschools and primary schools, classes will begin by distance September 7th. So what should be happening in terms of what the school should be doing? Right now, the teachers are at schools and they're preparing whatever learning packages they need to send home to you so that when September 7th comes, the parents will be able to, through whatever means that the school instructs them to or informs them about, to collect the learning packages, and they will do so and have their students work on it for a week or 2 weeks or how long that first installment is prepared for. They work at that at home, and then they make sure through the mechanism that the school decides, they return the information back to the school. So that is what should be happening right now in terms of the teachers' preparations so that they are ready for startup on September 7th. And this continues for the entire month of September for preschools and primary schools. Closer on to the end of that period, as the ministry continues to monitor the situation at school, they will then make sure that parents and schools are duly notified about what happens after the end of September. And so that's basically what we expect all of our primary schools and preschools should be doing now in preparation for this this new type of startup, this new school reopening mechanism that we have set up in place to engage our students.
So yes, so at the primary level, at the preschool level, school will not be the usual in the usual classroom. So parents, your role is very, very important. You will be co-teachers to your child's teacher. So you need to ensure that you have your teachers' contact information, the principal's contact information, so that you can be in touch with them to share with you how you can support your children. The Ministry of Education is also going to ensure that there are some model lessons. We're going to share those on our FB page to show parents how to address certain lessons, like maybe in mathematics, in reading. We are also going to make Mrs. Smith storybooks available for children. They can go to their child's school and borrow a book to read, and those books, the teachers will lend them the books, and they will provide some guided questions so that the reading is purposeful. We are encouraging parents to read at least 1 hour with or to your students, with your children. You are also asked to engage your child in at least 40 minutes in some writing activity. Maybe when they have read the book, you will ask them, like, describe the main character. Why did you like the main character? What do you think he or she could have done differently? So we will ask them some recall questions, some higher level questions, but the idea is to make this experience, this learning at home, very meaningful.
Let me pick up a little bit on the books, Dr. Babb. The schools, like I said before, and you've been sharing, they are preparing a learning package for children at home. A couple things about that. One, we want to make sure that every single child, regardless of where they are in the country of Belize, would be engaged in learning. And because we know that the access to technology is not available yet in all parts of the country or in all homes in Belize. Schools will generally do so, the pre-primary and primary schools will generally do so using print materials. But where there are cases in the same pre-primary schools and primary schools where they are able to use some form of technology, they are also encouraged to utilize that to begin to introduce students to how effective e-learning can be. But it should not be the only modality that is used, because schools need to make sure that every single child is accounted for during this period. The other thing about it is that with the use of print materials, the ministry does provide a free textbook program. And the free textbook program for primary schools includes a series of what we believe are very quality and relevant workbooks that students can use at home. So the ministry is at this time preparing the distribution of the workbooks, because we do that on an annual basis, and the textbooks. They would be circulated to the schools through the district education centers, and schools are being asked at this time to ensure that these very textbooks are the things that are sent home so that they can use as the primary mechanism that students can produce whatever it is they're learning in terms of the requirements that they lay out for this period of time. So schools are not going to be left alone to prepare just printed materials. There is the support that is already there through the use of the textbooks that the ministry provides to all schools across the country. So it's important for them to make sure. Now, one of the things we want to say to parents, because generally in many schools, they're not accustomed to sending these books at home. For basic security reasons, because they want to maintain the quality of the book so that it lasts for an entire year. And so we are going to ask parents now to take extra care of these books. Help us to teach our children how we must take care of them, because we need to make sure that they can last for the period of time that they need to use them for. So this is an extra bit of responsibility that parents need to be aware of, and we are asking them to help us and to cooperate in that regard.
I also want to reiterate that these textbooks and workbooks are free of cost, and every child is entitled to one of those books. Please contact your schools and the teachers of your schools and ensure that your child receives one of those books. I want to talk now about the secondary level. Distance education will be a little bit different at the secondary level. It will be done primarily online. The Ministry of Education will also be distributing very shortly digital learning devices and e-books to e-textbooks to all secondary schools who do not have access to these resources. There are some secondary schools who are ready to begin online education. And the Ministry of Education is allowing some schools that can demonstrate readiness to begin on the 22nd of September if they can assure us that every child will be included on the 22nd of September if they want to begin earlier than the startup date, which is the 5th of October. Technical and vocational institutions can also begin on the 22nd of September. But I want to repeat, only schools who demonstrate that every child will be engaged can begin on the 22nd of September. The high schools must demonstrate that those children have a device. If they do not have a device, the schools must provide paper-based lessons to those students. During the month of September, we are also going to ensure that secondary school teachers will receive training in online teaching and use of digital platforms. We are aware that our students have been out of school for 5 months, and that is a long time. And we know that our students have lost quite a lot. And that is why Mrs. Smith and I are here today, to appeal to parents to co-teach with us to partner with us to ensure that your child, your children are meaningfully engaged during these. We don't even know when school will reopen. So we need to ensure that every child gets the opportunity to develop both academically, physically, mentally, and socially. So parents, we are here to appeal to you to let us work together for the benefit of our students. If you are not sure what to do, we are just a phone call away. We are willing to model, we are willing to train you to become better teachers of your children. We know that parents are children's first teachers, but we are also going to train you to help you to deliver the academic curriculum with the guidance of a trained teacher. What if parents have problem with teaching their children at a distance? What would you recommend?
I think the bottom line is that parents need to understand that it is their responsibility to ensure that students are developing in a manner that is consistent with their age and their developmental ability. It is very important for parents to understand that. So in the past, when we were generally able to rely on the school to do most of the teaching, to do the instruction, we're not able to rely solely on the school anymore. The partnership really has to come into full force now. So while there are many working parents, because I'm sure quite a number of parents are not at home, like myself, they're not at home, the parents do have to make the type of provisions necessary to ensure that dedicated time is identified so that children can do work at home. It may not be during the normal working hours because the parent might be away, or if there is not another trusted adult there that can do the supervision and that type of thing. But that role that the parent has must be enhanced, become more prominent at this time. Parents can't just say it's up to the school to do it because the students are not in school. That's the point. That's the reality right now. They're not in school. They're at home. So the parents need to do their role, and when they need assistance, they need to then make contact directly with the class teacher first. So you must always have a contact for the class teacher, and where you can't get any assistance from there, you can then go to the principal of the school, and if all else fails, then you contact the ministry and we will try to intervene to see how we can support. But parents need to understand this, and schools need to understand that parents are not certified teachers. So whatever it is schools prepare to send home, they need to make sure that they put it in a way that parents would be able to work through what it is you're sending home with some assistance, and you need to make sure that you stay in contact with them. So I think that's the bottom line here. This partnership that we spoke of year after year after year, we must really make sure that this partnership is displayed prominently now. Everybody plays their role so that we can begin to bridge the learning gaps that our students have experienced over the last 5 months.
Right. Because of the pandemic, the role of parents has evolved a bit now, Mrs. Smith. We are expecting them to, as I said earlier, to be co-teachers. And we expect that parents will have some difficulty. For example, a child going to school for the first time, a 5-year-old, a parent might not know, how do I teach my child to hold a pencil? How do I teach my child phonics? How do I teach my child blends? All of those things are very technical. And parents, do not get discouraged. We have trained people in the Ministry of Education. At every district education center, there are early childhood educators. If your child has special needs, we have special needs officer in every district center. They can guide you. Please, it's important that you ensure every child, children who have special needs, children who are who don't have any disabilities, every child needs must be met, and we are here to support you. We know this pandemic has created concerns and anxieties of its own, but we need to get your children back in school, and education will now take place in your homes. It is your responsibility to ensure your children get the best quality education, and we are not going to leave you on your own. We will be here to support you all the way.
Let me also talk a little bit about the expectation that we have for what is going on in the month of September. And we're saying September now because that's where we're at this time. Closer on to that time, we will come back and make the necessary announcements. But parents and schools, and everybody knows that our students were not in school for the last term of the school year, last academic year, from April to June. So there is quite a bit of material in terms of curriculum coverage that should have happened during that time that did not happen because we were prevented from doing that. Even though some schools made attempt, the ministry made some attempt, it wasn't the same thing because they were not in school. When the students are actually back in school, whenever that is, face to face, we are going to do formal assessment of where they are. So we make reference to it as diagnostic assessment. So we're checking to see where they are in terms of their cognitive ability and so on. Until we are able to do that, what we are doing in the interim, which is what we're doing in the month of September, is to engage them in learning that we feel would be appropriate for their level. So a child who is going into standard 2, for example, would not have quite completed the standard 1 curriculum from the year before. So when schools are preparing the teaching material at this time, they should take that into consideration. So the material that they will produce and they will share with students at home would be a combination of the expectations that we should have had for them during the April to June period, as well as the readiness matters that they would need to deal with to get ready for the new class level that they're in. So teachers, I'm sure they've been working on it for the last month or so. They're doing it right now. They're hard at work. I have to say that to the general public, most of our teachers are hard at work, the ones particularly that have not been affected by the pandemic, directly affected by the pandemic. They're doing that. And I'm noticing, I want to make a distinction here. Our primary medium that we're suggesting, we're asking schools to get that information out, is through print resources, because that is the way we know it will reach to all corners of Belize. But where there are cases where they can engage them using some means of technology, that can be used to complement the print material that they have. And again, I reiterate, the print material is also whatever the school prepares with a combination of the textbooks that we have. The textbooks, somebody asked me before if the textbooks are to be used for students who are doing homeschooling. Homeschooling is a completely different matter. The parent is the teacher. That's a school, an alternate form of schooling that the ministry addresses and handles in a different way. So the textbooks that we are talking about are to be used for students who are enrolled in the regular school system, those students are unable to come out to school at this time. Those are the students we're saying should receive the textbooks, and whatever printed resources the teachers would share with them, or whatever e-learning means the schools will be able to engage them with. Whatever the school has in terms of its plans, that is what those students will have access to. So I wanted to make that important distinction between the students that are enrolled in regular school and the students that are signed up for homeschooling.
Okay, so before we move on to the questions, I just want to remind parents again that school will begin for preschoolers and primary school children on the 7th of September. And remember that school will not be held in the regular way it is normally held, but parents will be co-teachers to the regular teachers to ensure that our children are kept engaged. What I've learned that some schools are doing, that they will have a pickup box where parents are expected to pick up assignments. And so the teachers will communicate with students and tell parents, you can pick up the home packages at a certain area, and then teachers and parents are expected to return it back at a certain time, so that teachers can mark the papers and provide feedback on, the areas that the students need to improve on. So before we go to the questions, I just want to remind parents that we are in it together. You are not alone. Do not feel scared. Call us. We have our hotline numbers, 615-7402, 615-7597. We are here to support and to help you to ensure your children are meaningfully engaged.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Babb and Mrs. Smith. Let's go ahead and get into some of the questions that we have that people have been asking on the Facebook feed. Now, one of the questions, and this question every time we have the EAG on for Ask the Experts, this question comes up quite a bit, and it's come up again. And I always said that I'll wait till someone from the Ministry of Education is on the show to address this. Now, when we talk about, what are the teachers currently doing now in preparation for the opening of school?
At this time, all teachers are supposed to be in school.
And they're reporting to work.
And they're reporting to work. If, however, they have reasons not to report for work because they are not well, or whatever other case may exist, they should be at school.
Okay, and this question came up because the EAG has been saying that if people can work from home, it's advised that they work from home. Is there any provision for teachers to, if they're in whatever preparations that they're doing in looking forward to September 7th, is there a way that they can operate from home?
Well, if those teachers can function well in their regular classrooms, then they need to write to the Chief Education Officer and justify why they can't work at school and would need to work at home.
Okay. Will online classes be provided to primary school students?
The basic way of education for primary school students is through lessons. We are going to provide hard lessons for them, printed materials, as Mrs. Smith said. But however, if there are students or parents who possess devices and have internet connectivity, we are going to ensure that those lessons are available to them through that medium as well.
Okay,
Let me add to that too. The schools are just about completing. Most of them have completed what we call the learning continuity plan. They're planned to make sure that learning continues regardless, right? And one of the things they had to do when they're preparing that plan, they had to survey their students through contact with the parents, of course, to find out what it is you have access to. So every single school now can tell you 25% of my students have access to some form of technology, 35 have just basic telephone, a mobile device that they can use, WhatsApp or whatever else. About 50% of them don't have access to any form of technology or something like that. Every school now should be able to tell you that because they would have collected that information. What we've said to them is, now that you know what your reality is, you can prepare to teach your students in light of that reality. So if there are some things you can do using some type of technological platform, then you can do that. But remember, your survey is saying 25% of them have access to that. The next 75% of them may not. So you have to make sure that you are, whatever plan you put in place, that you are actually putting forward a plan that addresses all your students. So we know that the reality is that very many of our primary school students don't have access to the type of technology that those at the secondary level have. And we also know as well that with the secondary level, the ministry has made that commitment at this time to assist those ones that don't have with some form of device and internet connectivity. So we know very soon all our secondary students will have the access, right? That's not the case for all our primary school. And so we can't say the primary mode of instruction for primary level is online, because we know that's not the reality there. So schools need to pay that, need to be mindful of that, and then they need to adjust their instructional plan to meet whatever context they have to serve. So it varies from preschool to primary to secondary, just because of what our community has access to in terms of technology.
But basically what we're saying, Doran, is that for generally speaking for primary school, it will be paper-based. Sure. There will be a few exceptions, but in the survey, I think, Cecilia, we only had like 40%, I think, or less, that said they do have devices. So we don't want any child to be excluded. So we are going to prepare at the primary level, not we meaning the ministry, but the teachers, the schools, the administrators. It will be their responsibility to prepare paper-based lessons along with the government free textbooks to give to students and to parents.
Okay, so the teaching experience will vary from teacher to teacher. Even at one given school, each teacher could have a different teaching experience based on what their students have access to.
But it all has to be guided by what is in the learning continuity plan. So the learning continuity plan is for the whole school.
Right.
So whatever the individual teachers come up with is because of what that larger plan is saying. So a teacher is just, we should not have a situation where a teacher is acting on his or her own and is engaging students without knowledge or without the context of that larger plan.
Because that information is data driven and made available to them.
Right.
And then to remember that teachers teach according to our curriculum. And we have modified the curriculum, and the emphasis should be more on literacy and numeracy. But remember that children will be at different stages of learning. So you might find that two children from different schools might be at different levels depending on where the children are. And teachers will have to make accommodation to meet those needs. But as Mrs. Smith rightly said, the teachers have a they have a plan to follow. And so they are going to prepare packages based on that plan. But we are going to expect that teachers will guide parents, because parents will become co-teachers. This is going to be a new role that they will take on that they haven't done before. And it may create some issues, they may create anxiety and everything else. But we want the parents to know that we are going to help them by providing model lessons. We are going to provide some manuals. We are going to provide videos to help them. Parents who have devices and who have internet, who have laptops, they can go to Google. How do I teach my child to write? How do I teach my child initial songs? How do I teach my child blends? All of these things are available on the internet. But for those parents who don't have that, we are going to ensure that there is something for them, offered to them, some kind of training videos or manuals to ensure that children are getting what they deserve.
Okay, now based on what you just said, I have two questions and related to that were posted on Facebook. One of them is, you said that textbooks would be made available to those students at home or the parents. What about parents who opt for homeschooling? Will those textbooks be made available to them as well?
No. The textbooks are to be used in our government and grant-aided schools. So when we procure them, we pay attention to the numbers of students that are enrolled in those schools, and that's how that they're intended for that purpose. When students are not in one of those schools, then whatever structure they have set up, if they're in a private school, for example, they would have to rely on the services of the private school to help them through their learning experience. If they're in a home school, which is an official alternate to schooling, they would have to rely on the structures of the home schooling to help them through with their learning experience. So these textbooks are only for students that are in our public and or government and grant-aided schools. All right? And we want to say here that these textbooks should actually be the primary source of printed material that the students should rely on. Because one of the first things we hear from schools is how are we going to print all this material for students? Well, the textbooks are there. You may want to have some supplementary material that you will add to that, but your primary source should be the textbooks that we provide to you through the system that we have set up. The other thing too is, in addition to that, you may have heard at the press conference that the minister shared last week that we are also providing schools with a subsidy that would help them with the printed materials that they want to use to supplement. That is an amount, I believe it was indicated that it was $5 per student. So if there are 800 students in a school, you multiply that by $5, and that would be the amount that that school would receive to help them with the printing. But that is just a supplementary assistance that is provided, because we want schools to really ensure that the textbooks are the ones that they're using, that is what they send home to parents so that students can use. We spend a lot of money annually on these textbooks, so we need to use it, because that is what they're there for.
Okay. Now, going back to parents now becoming co-teachers, the reality is that there are some individuals who are illiterate. You know, some parents may be illiterate. What kind of support would be given to the parents of those children?
Well, you know, in Belize, Dorian, we all have extended families, or everybody knows somebody else. So what I would advise those parents who are unable to support their students to get family members, of course, in a safe setting, to support their children. And as I said, they can communicate with the teachers and say, you know, Mom, I can't read myself.
And
what can I do?
Huh? And there's no shame in that.
There's no shame in that. You have to be honest. And then maybe the teacher can advise them, you know, what they can do. Maybe they can help to guide a family member who may be able to support that child or those children.
And you don't even have to limit it to just those ones that are unable to read. When you think about the curriculum for the upper division of primary school, standard 5 and 6, the content that is outlined in standard 5 and 6, take math for example, might be content that a parent at home is unable to interpret and analyze and so on to help students. So that is fair. And when that is the case, those parents need to make sure their teachers know, look, I can't help my child with this content. I can supervise, I can set up the structure, I can have a schedule at home so that my child is doing work from this time to this time. I can make sure my child completes it. But in terms of the content, I can't check that part because I don't know that part. So there has to be that open communication between the parent and the teacher so that the teacher knows how to respond. Because the teacher will be unable to respond if the teacher doesn't know. And parents need to be mindful of that.
Right. So, because they want, you would imagine parents want the best for their kids, so they have to be honest with themselves and also honest with the teachers.
And sometimes too, Dorian, there are also, as I said, some very good programs on the television too that help students to read and to develop language skills and all of those things. Parents can encourage their children to watch those programs. You know, there are lots of learning opportunities on television programs as well.
And you know what? There might be some benefit to this as well if they could get a family member to assist them with that, they could follow along and maybe
They can be learning themselves.
Can be learning and
Yes.
learning how to read and write.
So in Belize, we always say that everybody knows another person. So there's somebody in your family that you can get to assist you and who would be guided by a teacher.
Okay.
I think the bottom line too is that parents, teachers, people who work at the Ministry of Education, everybody, the general public, we have to think differently now. We have to learn to be resourceful, and where we don't have certain things and where we are challenged with certain things, we have to begin to think outside the box. How do I get this done in light of the fact that I don't have what I'm accustomed to? Because things have changed. So if parents keep that at the forefront of their mind, then when they're acting in the best interest of their students, they will reach out. They will ask for help, they will search for the help, and they will get the help.
And sometimes too, they have older siblings. The parent might not be able to read or write well, but you have older siblings who can be guided by a teacher. The older sibling can go to the younger child's teacher and say, "Teacher, help me how to teach my younger brother or younger sister with phonics," with all of those things that the parent might not be able to support with.
Okay. Will the PSC still be administered this year?
The PSC will not be. It wasn't administered last year, and we doubt very much that it will be administered next year because we are working under not so normal circumstances, right? Children have been out for so long. We don't know when school will open, so it's quite unlikely that we may not have PSC next year, but it's not finalized.
And going along that line, how will SBAs be completed, and what about CSECs?
Well, SBAs, most of the SBAs were completed for last year. For this coming school year, we are not sure. These are the things that we need to revisit and discuss and decide how we'll move forward.
Okay.
Because remember that secondary schools will not officially start until the 5th of October.
Okay.
And just for those people who don't quite understand, just to repeat, it's not that we don't feel secondary should start up just yet along with primary. It's because we are trying to put some extra structures in place for secondary. We want to make sure that secondary school students are consistently engaged, because we know that even with our print-based material, sometimes it's a challenge to get those out and get them back in and so on. But with the online feature at secondary, all secondary school students will be engaged the minute we're able to get all of them going. And so that is the only reason why they're starting October 5th. And like Dr. Babb said earlier, if there is a school that can demonstrate that they're ready before October 5th, they will start September 22nd. But I'm saying all of that to say, in response to your question about SBAs, SBAs are really in-class assignments and tasks that come along with the external examinations from the region, the CXCs, right? So once we get secondary schools going October 5th proper, then that online engagement that they will have combined with face-to-face instruction, when we're able to do that, they should be able to get going in terms of the curriculum. Now they're starting later, so it will be a challenge, yes, but once secondary schools get started, they will be in a far better position to stay on track because of the connectivity that will be in place for them.
But Belize is also a part of the Caribbean Examination Council, and that is something that we will have to decide whether we want to participate next year, depending on the readiness of our students. Because you also have to bear in mind that school has been out for a while, and we have to admit that a number of our students have regressed. They are not at the level that we would want them to be, so we would need to do an assessment to determine, will our students be really ready for CXC next year? That's something that the Association of Principals of Secondary Schools would have to advise us as the Ministry of Education, and then we would need to communicate with the Caribbean Examination Council to determine if indeed our students are ready. So there's lots of deliberations and meeting and discussions before we can say that whether it can happen or not.
Okay. What about families that have more than one kid and at different grade levels with no internet or no computer or no laptop? How will they get help? What kind of assistance will be provided to
Remember, the children at the primary and preschool will be given hard copies. And those children will be given hard copies, and they'll be given free textbooks depending on the classes that they are in. So if they don't have internet or connectivity, that will not be an issue. The issue will be if the children are attending high school.
But we are going to get them the devices, and we are
internet
also working with Digit to make sure that they're able to
Have internet connectivity.
So secondary school students will be taken care of
Yes.
through the systems that we're setting up.
Okay. Now, will these works be graded for the first terms or report card? What kind of assessment will be done?
Well, I think we will advise to teachers initially, especially for the month of September, not to necessarily grade, but to give feedback. And then later on, if they see that things are progressing well, then maybe starting in the month of October, they can begin to grade. We are calling the month of September learning recovery, meaning determining where your students are, what support they need, and try to help them to get back on track. But we would not recommend grades in the first month.
What about, here's a question here that says, what consideration will be given for teachers that have children of primary school age? Will teachers be allowed to take their children with them at the school that those teachers / parents work at to ensure that their children complete assigned tasks?
Well, we are saying that none of our primary school students should be in school in the month of September. They should be learning however it is they're learning at a distance.
Right, but where will the teachers be teaching from?
The teachers will be at school. So
Okay,
this is what the person is asking. So a teacher who is also a parent of a primary school level child, when they go to their workplace, which is the school, can they take their child with them so that way they ensure that their child is completing?
They cannot take their children to school. Remember, the Ministry of Education is saying that children are not to report to school.
Okay.
But just like other parents, Dorian, you might be a parent and you might be working at the Radisson and you might not be able to provide the support to your child during the day. So you will have to pick a time that is suitable, that is convenient to you. Because there will be other parents who will be experiencing the similar problem who have to work as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Because, for example, Mrs. Smith right here, you have 3 children going to school and she'll have to come to work too.
I can ask them to bring them to work with me.
How can parents apply for a device?
How can what?
Parents apply for a device.
It's only secondary, let's classify. Only secondary at this time that we're providing the device for. The schools will tell us. So secondary schools right now, they're doing that check to see which students have, right, and which ones don't have. And so they will tell us we need so many for the first formers, the second formers, the third formers, and so on.
I think
so that comes from the schools.
I think, Cecilia, from the survey that we did at secondary, but that's not the updated one. It revealed about 50% like 56% of students at the secondary level have devices. There are about 22,000 students at the secondary level. So based on that survey, we believe that there are about 11,000 students who have and about 11,000 students who don't have. And the ministry will provide devices to the students who do not have. And the survey that we are also conducting right now, we are asking teachers to name the students who don't have. Because they don't want later on, you know what will happen, right? Everybody will not have.
Right.
So we have to be very careful.
What about parents? Hold on. Okay. What about parents who wish to transfer their child to private institutions, primary school, who are offering online lessons? Is this being allowed?
Yes, they can if they want to.
Okay.
But there's a procedure. They have to request a transfer form from their primary schools.
And I guess this question here is more related to the IT vets. How do you advise teachers to handle classes that are more hands-on, like technical drawing, welding, food and nutrition, for instance?
In those technical and vocational schools, because of the nature of the kind of work that they do, there are usually only about 15 students. So I believe that those students would be able to physically distance themselves from each other, and the teachers and the students would be wearing masks. So I think they would be okay with that kind of environment.
Okay. When will textbooks/workbooks be available? Have these been issued to the schools already? Will all packages be ready by September 7th from all schools for parents to pick up?
We are actually working this week to get those sorted out. The district education centers, which I had indicated before, is the office that helps with the distribution to schools. They will receive the call to come out and pick up the first set of textbooks next week, and they will take those back to the districts. The other set, we believe, will come in the first part of September, and those will be distributed as well in the same format. So they will be ready for the month of September.
Okay.
And one of the things we also know is that the district education centers also have a number of textbooks already. The ones that were left over from last year, those are already at the district level. And so the district education centers can begin to package those to help to begin the distribution even earlier than that. We also know that many schools still have textbooks left over from last year. Remember, we were not in school from April to June, so students would not have been using those textbooks. So schools can actually start with those ones as well. So there is enough on the ground already that they can take off September 7th, and then we complement it with the others that come in later on.
Okay. Here's a question. I'll just answer this for the person, because how will distributed paper textbook be disinfected since coronavirus live a few minutes, possibly up to 5 days on papers? The answer to that is very simple. When you go to a shop, they don't disinfect what you buy.
Exactly.
It's up to you to disinfect anything before you take it into your house. So we'll move on from that question.
Good answer.
Would it be feasible to arrange to have a dedicated television channel where each subject is taught?
Well, I know that we are working on that. We have discussed that, Cecilia, where we have a dedicated television station where lessons can be taught and modeled and that kind of thing. But right now, what we are going to do, Dorian, we are going to upload model lessons on our Facebook page. And so parents can look at our Facebook page, and every week we are going to try to upload new lessons, especially in reading and in writing. And it's also, some of the lessons are also available on the web page too.
Okay. Can you inform us how long should a child in infant 2 be online? I'm asking because my child wants to have classes all day. Is this allowed? I'm guessing that their child is just one of those children who just love to play with technology and such. So the child wants to be on. So what would you all suggest to be adequate screen time for a child of that age?
20 minutes at a time, and then they take a break, and then they try again. That is not even recommended for high school students.
Right.
You don't get online 8 o'clock and you stay online until 3 o'clock. You know, you have your lessons schedule, and you spend a portion of the time online going through the lessons, interaction with the teacher, if it's a synchronous session, and then there is a break. You do what you need to do, and then you come back on for the next lesson, and so on. So not even for a teenager that is recommended.
You don't want to overstimulate such a young child.
Exactly.
And that's why we said earlier that there should be breaks, there should be opportunities for children to, we want parents to engage them in exercises as well.
Right.
Things that they can do at home.
Physical activities is very
physical
important.
activities, right.
Okay, will the $5 per child be just for the month of September?
It will be for the entire year. That will be given to the managements of schools to assist them with the printing of materials.
Okay.
It's like what we call an office grant.
Okay. Now, one final question before we wrap up. Where can parents access any type of support that they may need? Who do they go to? Do they go to the teacher? Do they go to the Ministry of Education office? Where can they ask for that help or reach out for that support?
They should actually start with the teacher first, because chances are the support will be for that child. So the first place to start is with the teacher. Where the teacher is unable to assist, then you go to the principal of the school. And all of our schools are managed by some entity, and so if the principal is unable to help, then you go to the managing authority of the school. When that is not working, we have district education offices in each district where you can also seek additional technical support. And there's also the ministry hotline that you can call directly and get some additional assistance there. But the first place to start is usually with the class teacher.
All right. Okay, well, I think we've gone through most of the majority of questions here, majority of relevant questions at least. Dr. Babb, Mr. Smith, do you have any final words you'd like to say before we wrap up here?
I just want to say thank you for having us, Dorian, and I want to appeal to parents. We are depending on you to support your children. We are not going to leave you on your own. As I said earlier, we are in it together. We are here to help you, to train you, to support you, to ensure that your child is meaningfully engaged. Please do not allow your children not to engage in these learning activities. It's very important that your child gets an opportunity to grow academically, physically, socially, and emotionally.
And I want to say that as you work with your children to help them to develop cognitively and otherwise, I want to ask parents, I want to appeal to parents to also model for children how it is they are supposed to behave and operate in terms of keeping themselves safe. We know what the medical experts tell us about how we can keep safe in this pandemic. The hygiene stuff that we need to do in terms of washing our hands, the wearing of the mask. I know that wearing of the mask is very uncomfortable for a lot of people, but it's not helpful to anybody when we walk around wearing the mask inappropriately or incorrectly. So I want parents to appeal to parents to help us to model that. It's difficult for all of us. And then the necessary social distancing that is needed when you find yourself in a situation where you're not alone in an environment that you need to be. So if parents can help us to model that, then children learn. Children learn a lot by what they see happens around them, and if there is this modeling happening, then we will begin to teach our children this is what we need to do to keep all of us safe as we move forward with this pandemic.
Okay, thank you, both of you. Speaking of masks, we are nearing the end of August, which is Mask Up Month for Belize, and the Rotary Club of Belize. They have an online competition for the month of August where they're encouraging people to wear your mask. And you can go to the Rotary Club of Belize Facebook page to find out more about it. And all you have to do is take a selfie, post that selfie using the hashtag MaskUpBZ, and tag Rotary Belize and someone who you would want to mask up as well to protect. So that being said, thank you both for being here, and thank all the viewers for your questions as well. Remember to practice safe social distancing. Keep yourselves and your family safe by staying at home. If you must leave home, be sure to always have on your mask. Regularly wash and sanitize your hands, and if you have to cough or sneeze, do it into your elbow or tissue and dispose of it immediately. And also wash your hands again after coughing or sneezing. If you have any concerns, call the Ministry of Health hotline. That's 0800-MOH-CARE, 0800-664-2273. For all the latest and most up-to-date information on COVID-19 in Belize, you can visit the COVID-19 website, which is www.covid19.bz. Also, there's the Government of Belize Press Office Facebook page, as well as the Government of Belize Press Office website, which is www.pressoffice.gov.bz. Thank you all for tuning in once again. Have a wonderful day.